take my heart, you take my heart.
Noli has finally been released after several months of the community waiting, but I'm kind of mixed on this update. Overall, I think I'm more happy about certain survivor balance changes rather than Noli himself, and I have a lot of reasons for this that I will present to you in this video. Originally, I was just going to talk about Noli being weak, but that isn't the only issue that I want to point out with him. Overall, he just feels rushed, which is very ironic considering it felt like it took forever for this dude to come out.
A great slam and then some. It's on!
Noli overall is very inconsistent when compared to other killers. He is also tormented by bugs currently, and yes, I know they probably will add a patch to fix some of these bugs in the future, but considering how long we've waited for Noli, it's honestly astonishing that his moveset is this buggy and inconsistent. The reason why I think Noli's moveset is inconsistent when compared to every other killer is because of his Void Rush and Nova ability. First of all, both of these moves are extremely buggy. Void Rush has the tendency to just not work at all, even if you charge it all the way up. Sometimes you'll just go forward for half a second and then stop dead in your tracks even if you're holding the Q key the entire time. By the way, did you notice how I mentioned you have to hold down the Q key for Void Rush? For whatever reason, the devs thought it would be a good idea to force players to hold down the hotkey for the ability, otherwise it will just cancel out. I honestly have no clue why they decided to do this because no other ability in this game forces you to hold down the hotkey. And sure, if you let go, it's an effective way of canceling the Void Rush in case you miss, but why can't I just press the Q key again to cancel out the Void Rush? Not only this, but Void Rush is just a giant spit in the face to console and mobile players. I can't even imagine how difficult it is to hold down Void Rush on mobile while also turning your camera. And sure, this may be easier to do on console rather than mobile, but regardless, mobile and console players have reported Void Rush just randomly canceling out even if they're holding down the button. Noli's Nova ability is also very buggy. Sometimes it will just shoot straight down even if you're aiming forward. It barely makes any sense. It's also extremely inconsistent for no reason at all, because depending on what type of surface you land the attack on, the size of the explosion will vary. If you hit a survivor or a wall, then the explosion will be its normal size. But if you hit the ground, then the explosion size will be decreased. This is another decision where I am just beyond confused what they were thinking. No other ability in this game varies in effectiveness depending on what type of surface it lands on. This is also just another giant spit in the face to mobile and console players because it's way harder to aim this ability on those systems. I really don't understand why they decided to make Void Rush and Nova so gimmicky, and these said gimmicks only make these abilities even worse. And later in the video, I'll explain why they aren't even that good in the first place. And again, it's like they had zero regard for mobile and console players when making this killer, despite a majority of the player base being those said people.
A brawl is surely brewing. And begin!
Ever since I heard Noli's new theme on YouTube, I've been waiting to talk about his sound design in a video. I'm not going to hold anything back here. I think Noli's new theme is genuinely terrible, and it barely can be considered music. I don't care if people call it speedcore or something. It's still loud and obnoxious, and it actually gave me several headaches. And that's not even me trying to make a joke. It actually gave me a headache several times. What's even worse about Noli's theme is you're going to be hearing it almost constantly. Not only because almost everybody's using him because he just came out, but also because his terror radius is 80 studs, while most other killers have a terror radius of 60 studs. So you're going to be hearing this theme a lot, and it certainly doesn't help that it's literally cancer in the form of audio. I heard they're trying to rework Noli's theme, but honestly just bring back the old one. Noli's old theme was honestly one of my favorite themes to ever come out of this game, and to see it just get scrapped on a whim and replaced with garbage is honestly a really good summary of how often the developers scrap things, or change things that don't need to be changed. Anyways, I'm done talking about his theme. Let's talk about his actual sound effects. And I have a problem with those too. First of all, I have no idea why they decided to make Noli the meme killer, because for whatever reason he's always playing random sound effects that just get annoying after a while. Wow, I've stunned Noli for the 50th time because he's so easy to counter. I can't wait to hear the same annoying, "Do you think you can actually defeat me?" sound effect. It feels like they ran out of time to actually give him real sound effects, or they just didn't care enough. And like I already said, it gets very annoying listening to the same sound effects over and over again, and that wouldn't be an issue if all of the sound effects weren't just annoying memes.
This match will get red hot. You're up!
Okay, this definitely has to be the most disappointing part about Noli. I really like Noli's abilities, but I feel like they don't really fit him, considering none of them really involve being able to control hallucinations. That's right, hallucinations are just a passive that you can't control whatsoever, which is really disappointing considering the main selling point for this killer is his hallucinations. Not only that, but hallucinations really don't do anything at all. Obviously, they're not real, and that's the point, but there's no punishment for falling for these hallucinations. The only thing hallucinations do is annoy survivors, and they really don't slow down or distract them at all. This may be pretty obvious, but I think falling for hallucinations should have some sort of punishment that involves you being slowed down. For example, if you try to stun or run away from a fake Noli, you'll be hit with a certain level of slowness for a certain amount of time. Another good example would be the fake Dusakar shields. You would have to look up in the sky for its origin point to avoid getting hit with slowness. The only type of hallucination that actually has a punishment for falling for it is a fake generator. Fake generators are the only well-executed part of Noli's hallucination mechanic, and even then, there's a very low chance you will fall for a fake generator, considering how many clues there are. And even if you do completely fall for a fake generator, and you do all of the puzzles to fix it, your only punishment is that you wasted time doing that, which is very dependent on what type of survivor you are, and you get Hallucination 3, which all things considered really isn't that much. The only real risk you face with Hallucination 3 is Noli's Void Rush instantly doing the ground slam, but even then that has a catch, because then he will only deal 40 damage total with Void Rush when he could do potentially 50 damage if he landed it twice without the survivor having hallucination. Overall, I'm just really upset that this killer is considered a trickster and his tricks don't do anything. They may fool some players a little bit, but they don't have any real statistical downside for falling for them. And again, his moveset doesn't match with the fact that he's based around hallucinations. I do like his abilities, but none of them synergize with his hallucinations at all.
Here's a real high-class bout. And begin!
Okay, this is where the video gets really controversial, because I know a majority of the community will not agree with me on this, but I think Noli is the weakest killer in this game currently, and this is where you'll see all of my other complaints come into play, and how they actually affect how powerful Noli is. Inconsistency, sound design, and hallucinations all cause different types of issues in almost every one of his abilities. Let's start off with Noli's M1. It is easily the weakest M1 in the game, and there's hardly any debate. First of all, its windup is as long as John Doe's M1, and that ability is notorious for being predictable and slow. Not only that, but Noli's M1 only does 25 damage, which is the lowest amount of damage an M1 does in this game. There's also a sound cue for when Noli can M1 again, which makes his M1s even more predictable than they already are. Noli's M1 doesn't even have anything special about it. It just does damage. It doesn't even apply hallucination to survivors hit by it. Next up, we have Noli's Void Rush, which is the worst main damage ability in this game. Every killer in this game except for John Doe has one ability that does a lot of damage but is really risky to use, and Void Rush is a lot of risk with very little reward. The windup for Void Rush is a very obvious sound cue that you have plenty of time to react to. It's extremely easy to counter due to the windup alone, but then you realize Noli has to land this move twice to deal the full amount of damage unless a survivor has Hallucination 2 or greater. Landing Void Rush once on a competent survivor is already hard enough, but landing it twice happens as often as The Rock not taking steroids every week. And sure, you may do 40 damage with one hit if the survivor has Hallucination 2 or more, but then you're only doing 40 damage instead of the 50 damage you could have done. But again, landing Void Rush twice on one survivor is very rare, so it's usually better to use Void Rush on a survivor who has Hallucination 2 or more. But like I already said, you only do 40 damage total this way, which is also the lowest amount of damage that a killer's main damage ability does. Moving on to Noli's projectile ability, Nova, it doesn't look much better than any of his other abilities. It has a very loud sound cue and a very long windup of 0.78 seconds, which is a lot. On top of this, it only does 15 damage, and sure, it may have a very large hitbox since it's an explosion, but 15 damage is so inconsequential, it's not even funny. Sure, survivors hit by the blast are pulled to the center of the explosion, but this is a pathetic way of slowing down survivors. Even if Corrupt Nature's slowness 1 for 4 seconds upon hit is pathetic, it still can actually affect how well someone can survive a chase. But being pulled to the center of the explosion barely does anything to limit a survivor's movement. Lastly, we have Observant, which is actually a fairly unique ability that allows Noli to teleport to any generator on the map, and even the fake ones. I would like to say this ability is good considering it also gives survivors hallucination when you use it, but unfortunately I just can't. Surprise, surprise, this ability has a super obvious telegraph that gives you plenty of time to react before Noli teleports. The sound cue is very loud, and every generator literally turns completely black. A lot of the time you'll just use this ability for seeing survivors, because if you teleport, everybody's going to run away from the generators and you would have wasted your time. Overall, my opinion on this update is fairly positive, but at the same time, it feels like they rushed it out at the very last second. This update feeling rushed isn't just with Noli. A lot of other things in this update feel rushed too, like certain skins. But the main focus of the update was Noli, and I feel like they should have put the most love and care into this killer, and they just didn't. Noli has several bugs, his sound design is very questionable, his hallucination mechanic is very boring and just feels pointless, and overall he's just weak. He's easily the worst killer in the game currently. Despite me making several jokes about Noli never releasing, I had high hopes for the killer, and I really wanted him to be as good as he could be, but it feels like they rushed him out of the door, and that really sucks. And, like I said earlier in this video, his abilities don't synergize with his hallucination gimmick. It feels like they just took the abilities from one killer concept and then just gave them to Noli, without considering that the main selling point of this killer is his hallucinations. Noli's moveset feels way more fit for the character of JX1DX1. That's just what I personally think, but it's hard to deny that his moveset doesn't feel like it was made with his hallucinations in mind. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments, and goodbye.